In the history of bodybuilding, there have been true giants, monsters so massive they push the limits, reaching weights of up to 180 kilograms. Some of them, like Nasser El Sonbaty and Greg Kovacs, ended up dying around the age of 45 after years of abuse and an out-of-control career. Back in the 1960s, bodybuilding emerged as a celebration of aesthetically impressive physiques, bodies that stood out for their muscle mass beyond that of the average person. Over time, though, the sport kept evolving, reaching ever more supernatural levels of size. Yet even then, that aesthetic ideal hadn't been lost. Sheer physical beauty was still enough to captivate an increasingly wide audience. Once the aesthetic physiques of the golden era had been surpassed, it was clear that bodybuilding was, at its core, a sport about muscle and definition. That's what the federations seemed to be looking for. For many, Dorian Yates would become the defining figure of a new era, a man who bet everything on size, pushing aesthetics slightly into the background. But make no mistake, Dorian wasn't the only one who stunned the world with his size. Height and physical presence play a major role in real life, and in this regard, Lou Ferrigno, a rebranded bodybuilder from the golden era, stood 1.96 meters tall and even made Arnold look small. Back then, bodybuilding wasn't yet the race for sheer mass it would eventually become. After the glorious 80s with Lee Haney and company, the man who would ultimately seal the change in paradigm was none other than Ronnie Coleman, the greatest bodybuilder of all time. Able to combine size, definition, and, at his peak, aesthetic appeal, Ronnie became the most dominant figure during the sport's most competitive era. Yet, if we're talking pure size, one man even surpassed Ronnie's limits: Greg Kovacs, the Canadian beast who carried more muscle mass than anyone had ever seen. Standing at 1.93 meters, he reportedly weighed 187 kilograms in the off-season, and that's how he looked at just 17 years old. Consider this: Big Ronnie stepped on stage at 130 kilograms, while Greg Kovacs competed at 150 kilograms. Just think about that: 190 kilograms off-season, 65 centimeters arms, and overall more mass than a gorilla. In person, he made other bodybuilders look like children. He was the first human to hit nearly 200 kilograms while still showing vascularity and an acceptable level of muscle definition. Nothing like it had ever been seen before. In one interview, Nasser El Sonbaty even said Greg couldn't bend down or clean himself. Rumors also spread that he consumed 1 kilogram of protein per day. Just imagine how many tubs of protein powder that would take. Greg was never truly competitive. He never qualified for the Mr. Olympia, and as a pro, he never placed near the top. But outside the circuit, everyone knew who he was. It was said that people paid him $1,000 just to do a guest posing appearance. The price of maintaining such massive size was steep. Kovacs, who started out with a more harmonious physique, eventually sacrificed his midsection just to keep the size that made him famous. Over the years, he lost quality, to the point where his abdomen deteriorated completely. These are the last photos of Greg Kovacs on stage, clearly suffering from abdominal distension he could no longer control, a far cry from the jaw-dropping physique he once had. His career wouldn't last long. He died in Canada at age 44 after suffering a heart attack. No doubt, he was a bodybuilder who broke every limit, right to the very end. In the 90s, Paul Dillett and Nasser El Sonbaty gave Dorian Yates a run for their money. Dorian had just won 5 straight Mr. Olympia titles, and still the boundaries of size were being shattered. That year, the major rivalry was between Nasser and Dorian, but it's worth looking at the overwhelming physique of Paul Dillett, one of those bodies that would go down in bodybuilding history for its sheer scale and structure, all while keeping seemingly impossible proportions. It was said no physique left such a lasting impression as his. He dwarfed even the largest competitors, stepped on the most competitive stages, and although he never won a Mr. Olympia, everyone remembers him. Like many others, he was another bodybuilder who went too far. At the 1994 Arnold Classic, one of the most alarming incidents in live bodybuilding history occurred. Paul was aiming to present the most shredded version of his career. Later, it came out that he had overused diuretics that day to the point of suffering cramps and convulsions that caused him to lose consciousness on stage. Still, he tried to keep going, fighting to show off the physique he had worked so hard for. Most people didn't know that Paul Dillett almost died that day from using one of the most powerful diuretics available at the time. During the pre-judging round, his body collapsed as he attempted a double biceps pose, and Flex Wheeler had to hold him up as the crowd watched in shock. However, Paul Dillett managed to pull himself together and came back out, greeted with roaring applause from the crowd. But once again, the same cramp struck, and this time he had to be treated by medics and rushed to the hospital. A devastating image. Paul was, without a doubt, the crowd favorite that night. He had come in completely shredded, but it was that very conditioning that led to 5 people having to carry his 120-plus kilogram body off the stage so they could assist him and administer an IV drip. As was revealed years later, the procedure was extremely difficult because Dillet was so severely dehydrated that his veins were barely visible.
When I woke up in the hospital, and once I was up, the doctors told me that we had to revive you. You were legally dead for 1 minute.
That's crazy.
Yeah, legally dead for 1 minute. I don't think I was ever the same after that. As a bodybuilder, as an athlete, you want to win by any means necessary. And god damn, I was looking crazy that day. It's like my condition never came back like like when I first started because of that incident. It is scary,
Yeah.
I never touched diuretic after that.
Just a year before that incident, few people were aware that Mohammed Benaziza had died just hours after the Dutch Grand Prix, also due to extreme dehydration. In his case, it was a heart attack that ended his life. And the truth is, in bodybuilding, it's not just size that poses a serious risk. Dehydration may be even deadlier. For bodybuilders like Andreas Münzer, it also proved fatal. His untimely death shocked the entire bodybuilding world. His extreme practices arguably gave us the most conditioned physique ever seen on a professional stage, but at the cost of his life, at just 31 years old. When subcutaneous fat is almost entirely stripped away and the body is pushed into an extreme state of dehydration, if the muscles are fully loaded, it creates the appearance of striations, a striking effect that allows each individual muscle fiber to be seen. That's why in bodybuilding, striations in the glutes and lower back are considered the clearest indicators of how conditioned an athlete is, since those are the hardest areas to define. By this standard, Andreas Munzer was extraordinary. No matter where you looked, all you saw were striations. While they're common in the shoulders, he displayed them across his quads, triceps, and arms, all sharply divided. His chest was particularly striking. When he flexed it, you could make out each individual fiber that formed the pectoral muscle. But alongside all these extreme methods, in 1996, after competing at the Arnold Classic, Munzer passed away at just 31 years old. His vital organs simply gave out. His use of substances was so extensive that the autopsy revealed internal stomach bleeding, developed tumors, and a heart that weighed more than double that of a normal person. Andreas Munzer never stood out for his size, but for presenting a level of conditioning that, to achieve, he sacrificed nothing less than his life. Another bodybuilder known to have pushed every boundary was Nasser El Sonbaty. He was always incredibly open about all sorts of topics, and many believe that this brutal honesty, especially when it came to steroids and other controversial issues in bodybuilding, may have affected the outcome of one of the most debated Mr. Olympia contests in history. To give you an idea, Ronnie Coleman himself once said that Nasser was the most impressive bodybuilder he had ever stood next to in person.
You put him like peak big guys, like even more impressive at his peak than Dorian Yates?
Yeah.
You put El Sonbaty ahead of Yates as impressive?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's a big statement, Ronnie.
Yeah, but you wasn't there. You didn't see him. One of my best friends.
El Sonbaty?
Yeah. Nicest guy ever.
The 1997 Mr. Olympia was expected to be Nasser's year, especially since Dorian Yates showed up in one of his weakest forms. Nasser, who arrived in spectacular shape, ended up placing second. It later came to light that Dorian had competed with an injured arm and was already beginning to lose control over his midsection. His right arm, in particular, was in visibly poor condition. That's why, for many, the 1997 Olympia is considered one of the biggest robberies in bodybuilding history, or at the very least, one of the most controversial championships of recent times.
To tell you the truth, I was actually crying because I felt completely robbed.
Nasser was very good. Some people think she should have won.
I never really understood how Dorian Yates really won.
Yeah, I thought he should have won easy.
Somebody should have been crowned in this.
Nasser was so outspoken to talk openly about drugs.
In the years following that showdown with Dorian, Nasser was never quite the same, paving the way for Ronnie Coleman's reign. Still, true to form, he continued to speak openly about substance use and other sensitive topics. Even after retiring from competitive bodybuilding, he admitted to still using high doses of anabolic steroids. In interviews, he explained that this was his job, staying in shape, attending guest appearances and shows, and making a living from it. Meanwhile, other bodybuilders like Günter Schlierkamp chose to step away from excess and prioritize their health, enjoying a safer, more comfortable retirement. Nasser, on the other hand, continued living the same lifestyle until his death in Egypt at the age of 47. Being one of the few bodybuilders of that era who spoke so candidly about steroids, his death was more closely linked to substance use than perhaps any other. Regardless, Nasser El Sonbaty, already a legend in bodybuilding, left us far too soon. Yet another example of someone who pushed past every limit. In the modern era, one of the most tragic years in bodybuilding was 2017, marked by the incident involving Dallas McCarver at the Arnold Classic, which coincided with the death of Rich Piana. Both were icons of the same philosophy, giving absolutely everything, no matter the consequences. At just 25 years old, Dallas McCarver was already lifting the same weights as Ronnie Coleman. He managed to do 5 reps on the bench press, with the last one barely assisted, comparable to Coleman's 2 reps at 263 kilograms. Dallas even pushed himself to squat 308 kilograms for 7 reps, and his incline press, performed with 90-kilogram dumbbells, was featured in a viral video that some say even outshone Ronnie Coleman himself. Legends who died for the sport. And as if that weren't enough, just look at his signature lift, the deadlift. While Ronnie Coleman maxed out at 363 kilograms, Dallas McCarver, at only 25 years old, pulled an astonishing 383 kilograms, and that as a bodybuilder, not even a powerlifter. That gives us a sense of the sheer scale of what we're talking about. Dallas wasn't some up-and-coming bodybuilder in his 20s, he was already the real deal. He had reached levels of muscularity that were completely unheard of for someone his age. Keep in mind that most bodybuilders don't hit their peak until well into their 30s. That's what made his case so shocking. Not just that he'd already made a name for himself in the industry, but that he was only 26 years old. In August 2017, his body started showing signs that something wasn't right. No less than at an Arnold Classic, where he was set to face Brandon Curry and was considered one of the favorites, he had to be helped off stage by 3 people because he could no longer walk on his own. And while to this day no direct link has been confirmed between that incident and what followed, the truth is that tragedy struck not long after. On August 22, 2017, media outlets reported that Dallas McCarver had passed away at the age of 26, having choked to death on food during dinner. It said that he had been on a video call with his girlfriend just hours earlier. A friend found him unconscious with food still in his mouth and rushed him to the hospital. While that was the official version, his autopsy later revealed deeply alarming results. His heart weighed 830 grams, 3 to 4 times heavier than that of a normal adult. His liver was 5 times its normal size. His kidneys showed significant damage, his thyroid was compromised, and his testosterone levels were a staggering 100 times above the average for a normal adult male. What made that year even more tragic was that barely a week after Dallas's death, Rich Piana, at 46 years old, fell into a medically induced coma and spent 2 weeks fighting for his life, ultimately without surviving. What was so striking about Rich was that he had been one of the few in the bodybuilding world who spoke openly and honestly about his steroid use. In earlier videos, he had even addressed cardiomegaly, the dangerous enlargement of the heart that some bodybuilders experience as a result of long-term substance use.
I've been taking steroids for 25 years. I started when I was 18. The reason I started was I was a competitive bodybuilder and I was willing to do whatever it takes to reach my goal. This is not making me look good right here, what I'm saying, but I'm just being honest and I'm being straight and I'm telling people the truth. I'm not telling people to take steroids. I'm not recommending it. In fact, I don't think it's a very good fucking idea to take steroids. You know, if you can stay natural for as long as you can, that's the way to go. You stay natural your whole life, that's the way to go. Maybe 12 years ago, right when insulin got really popular, all the bodybuilders were taking insulin. And, you know, this guy that I was friends with at the gym, he decided to take insulin. And he took a shot, he went to work, and he was a bouncer, and he was tired. So, you know, he told, you know, the head guy, he said, look, I'm gonna lay down in the back room for like 45 minutes, man, just cover me. I just don't feel good, just, you know, I'm gonna lay down for a little bit. So he said, oh, okay, no problem, bro, I'll cover for you, you know, go ahead, I'll wake you up in an hour. So he went, and his name was Samson, 330 pounds, monster. Didn't compete, you know, never wanted to compete, just a big ass dude. So anyway, I had to throw that in. About 8 hours goes by and the club's closing and it's like, where the hell's Samson at? You know what I mean? And people didn't even realize he was working. So he's like, oh shit, I was supposed to wake up an hour ago, you know, an hour after he laid down, he's in the back room. So they go in the back room and he had throw up all over him. And he had been throwing up, laying on his back, and seizure after seizure after seizure after seizure. And they called an ambulance and, you know, he was basically dead is what they said. They revived him and he is now in a wheelchair and he cannot feed himself. Now, this is some serious shit I'm talking about.
Rich Piana was probably the first person with real reach on the internet who decided to speak openly about the darker side of bodybuilding. Up until then, all anyone ever showed was the facade, the surface, what everyone sees. But more than 10 years ago, he came clean, admitting that he was likely suffering from cardiomegaly, that his organs had grown due to growth hormone, and that his digestive system was no longer what it used to be. Ironically, the man who was warning us about the things no one else dared to speak about was the same man who couldn't stop growing. Even after achieving a monstrous physique, he couldn't resist turning to substances like synthol, injecting oils that made his body look even more surreal. And for all of that, yes, Rich Piana was another bodybuilder who went beyond the limits. What shocked the world most were his interviews with Generation Iron. Unfortunately, most of them are under copyright, so I'll now give voice to Rich Piana's own words, drawn from several interviews he gave over the years. The side effects I've had from using growth hormone, I've talked about this before, but people want me to be more specific. So I'll be more specific. I've used it for over 10 years straight. And when I say straight, I mean straight. I've got to say, my shoes, I used to wear a size 12, and now I wear a size 16. My hands, my fingers, they've grown. My wrists have grown, I'd say almost 2 centimeters. My fist probably gained about ½ an inch in width. Basically, it causes every tissue in your body to grow. Now, saying that, my heart has probably grown. My brain has probably grown. My intestines too, because my stomach has gotten thicker over the years. And that's the side effect that bothers me the most. It's the reason I finally decided to stop using growth hormone. As bodybuilders, we don't think about our hearts growing or whether we'll have a heart attack at 50. We think more about things like, damn, my hair's falling out. What am I gonna do? But as we get older, we start to realize these things. And now I'm much more worried about how all this is going to affect me in the future. Bodybuilding is supposed to be about lifting weights, about getting a pump. It's not supposed to be about injecting yourself. But over the years, it's become more about injections than about lifting weights. I can't honestly say I recommend steroids, but I'm not against them either. It's a personal choice. What I am 100% against is young guys using them, teenagers, or even people in their 20s. The problem today is that young guys start going to the gym already knowing about steroids. Back in the day, you'd join a gym, then go buy some protein. That was the thing. I'm working out, I need protein. Now it's like, I'm working out, I need steroids, as if the two go hand in hand. And that's something that's really gotten out of control. If you're using steroids and you keep using them, there's gonna come a time when they just stop working. And at that point, all you're doing is destroying your body. That day will come. And all the good you got from them, with time, it brings all the bad too.